Welcome to the Picky Girl Travels podcast, the show for Black women who want more out of life and to live it as they see fit. The message here is all about defying convention, embracing adventure, and regretting absolutely nothing. I'm your host, Adalia of PickyGirlTravelsTheWorld.com. Hey, y'all. Hey, y'all. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to remind y'all that there are just 5 spots left for the Reclaim the Retreat special Valentine's Day retreat this February in El Salvador. And for some of y'all, this might be the first time that you've heard about this. Did you know that I host retreats? I was going to say all around the world, but we're working on that part. I do, along with my business partner, Ivana Robinson, who you've seen here on the podcast many times. She is a life and leadership coach, and we worked together to design the Reclaim retreats to be safe spaces where you can relax, you can rejuvenate, and reclaim the life that is meant for you. Our retreats, Reclaim the Retreat, these are unique experiences. It is a cultural retreat, but also a coaching retreat. It combines the benefits of travel, learning, personal growth. On our retreats, you will get to explore beautiful, diverse landscapes in places like Hawaii, Oaxaca, Mexico, La Libertad in El Salvador, and you get a chance to immerse yourself in rich, vibrant cultures and connect with other like-minded women and femmes while you receive coaching and guidance from us that is going to help you discover your true self, overcome your challenges, achieve your goal, transform your life. Reclaim the Retreat is more than just a vacation. That's not even hyperbole, y'all. It is. It is a transformational journey that is going to empower you to reclaim your life, your happiness, your peace. So if you're interested in joining us in February for Valentine's Day, that retreat's gonna be a little different than our regular retreat, or you wanna know more about our other retreats, go to the website, reclaimtheretreat.com, www.reclaimtheretreat.com, and you can find out all the information there. You can reserve your spot, you can get on a wait list, you can do all that kind of good stuff. I had to throw that in here because I'm not very good about talking about all of the things that I am doing. And that means that, like, if this podcast also plays on YouTube, but let's say you're listening to this podcast and you've never been to my YouTube channel, which is awesome, and you should totally check it out, but you might have missed us talking about Reclaim the Retreat. All right, so let's get down to business. On every episode of this podcast, you hear me say that, here the vibe is all about defying convention, embracing adventure, and regretting absolutely nothing. But I want y'all to understand that those are not just words I'm saying in an intro. Those are actually like the guiding principles of how I live my life, this new life that I created for myself 8 years ago. In a lot of the past episodes of this podcast, we've talked a great deal about living a life that throws away society's rules, the rules about who you're supposed to be as a Black woman. We've really focused on the defying convention and embracing adventure. Some of my favorite conversations we have had here have kind of focused on that part. Like when we had Keturah Kendrick on for the Free Black Woman, Unpartnered, Unbothered, Unchained That was such a great conversation. Adria was on one of the early episodes talking about how to leave what no longer serves you. Stephanie Perry was here talking about how dreams don't expire, how she was pursuing motherhood in her 50s. Alicia Renice was here, and we talked about hustle culture is lying to you. Like, all of those conversations, those are some of my favorites, all really focused on defying convention, embracing adventure. Today, we are going to be talking about how to regret nothing, how to live a life where you do not have regrets. We've talked about regret, but we've not really dug into it. So that's what I want to do today with this episode. And I think we've got to start sort of at the beginning. Like, we hear people say, I have a few regrets, or, I don't want to regret that. But what does that even mean? What does it mean? What does it mean to be regretful? Having regret means that you feel sadness, you feel repentance, you feel disappointment over something that has happened to you, that has been done to you, that has taken place in your life. And I think it is safe to say that as human beings living on earth, we've all experienced regret at some time. I mentioned, I try not to have regrets, to live my life in such a way that I don't regret anything. But this is the new chapter of my life. This is the chapter of my life that started 8 years ago when I turned 40. The Adalia that existed before that, whoa, she had some regrets. There was lots of sadness and disappointment about things that had happened in my life. Okay, so I think it's very natural for us to experience that at some point, but I think really the key is not letting the regrets dominate our life, figure heavily. So how do we even find ourselves in a situation where we have regrets? I think this is important for us to look at if we're going to talk about how to live a life where you don't regret anything. So at its heart, when we have regrets, how do we end up with regrets? It is, in essence, a reaction to a disappointing event in our lives. We wish things had gone a different way. The things that we regret are things that the outcome was undesirable. It was a bad outcome for us. It was a negative outcome for us. When we feel regretful or when we feel regret, there's a lot of us worrying about that we should have made different choices. So like the choices we make in our life and whether or not we feel regret, those two things go hand in hand. And usually when we feel regret, it's because I made this choice. It didn't turn out great, and I feel some kind of way. I feel bad about the choice that I made. And so I want to sort of back up from that a little bit, dig a little deeper, because that is human nature. That is very normal. But we need to understand that what we regret changes over time. So if I'm coming to you and I'm saying, like, live a life with no regrets, that's going to hit different at 45 than it would at 25. I think most people are familiar with the book that WHERE put together. She was a hospice nurse, I think, a hospice worker in Australia, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. I wish I'd had the courage to live true to myself and not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I had had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends, and I wish I had let myself be happier. These were the most common themes she heard in regrets from her time working in hospice. Okay, typically, not exclusively, the folks who are going to be in hospice tend to be much older folks. And so they've had like a whole life, decades and decades of life, to then look back on and say, these are the things I wish had turned out differently. I don't love the decisions I made about these particular topics. But if we were to ask millennials, what are some of their regrets? And we don't even have to suppose. BuzzFeed actually did that. They asked millennials, BuzzFeed and Reddit both did that. They asked millennials, what are some of their regrets? I regret getting married young. I wish I had lived more of my life before tying myself to someone else. Somebody else said, I regret that I waited until my 30s to actually talk to a professional about my depression and anxiety instead of trying to deal with it myself. Another one, and I just picked randomly from the list. I wish I had listened to myself and followed my dreams instead of following what my parents thought I should do. So I mention all of this to say that the regrets that we might have are going to be different depending on the stage we are in life when we are reflecting back. Okay? And that is okay. But we've said our goal is, or at least the goal I have for you, is for you to live life without regret. Live your life in such a way that you don't look back on choices you made and feel bad about them. That you don't feel sad and disappointed when looking back on the choices you made or the things that have happened to you in life. Okay, so I've said having regrets is a normal thing. But what I want for you is a life where you live regret-free. So how do we close that gap? How do we get there? First thing is to make better choices. And I know you're like, what, girl? If I could have made better choices, I would have. Hear me out. When I say better choices, that is not coming from a place where I am trying to assign blame to you for the messed up stuff that has happened to you in your life. That is not what I'm trying to do. What I'm saying is, when you think back on the situations that cause you some regret, if you really examine the choices that you made, were those choices aligned with your values? Were those choices that were really aligned with the things that you hold dearest and most important? I had a client the other day who was talking about their decision to move to another country and how they were on the fence about it, and somebody told them, well, what is your first mind? What does your first mind tell you? Go with your first mind. We've all heard this said before. And I would say that when you think about the choices you've made in the past that cause you regret, more often than not, you did not go with your first mind, did you? No. I believe your first mind, your intuition is often very much aligned with your values, the things that you hold dear, the things that are important to you. But when we look back on the poor decisions or the decisions that cause us grief, a lot of times those decisions were not aligned with what you held deeply in your soul. So if we want to move forward in life and live it in such a way that we don't look back and have regrets, we have to really first dig into, well, what's important to me? What are my values? And use those to guide us in making decisions. So Somebody might have a lot of shame and disappointment over sizable student loan debt. And maybe you chose to take on that student loan debt to pursue a degree in a career because the pressure you got from your family, the pressure you got from society told you that's what you need to do for a living. That's what Black excellence looks like. That's what will help you build generational wealth. That will be the thing that makes your parents proud. Any one of those reasons. But in your deepest heart of hearts, you ain't never want that degree. You might have wanted a degree, but you ain't want that one. That was not the major you wanted. That was not the career. If you could choose anything, that was probably not the career you would have wanted to choose. You would have wanted. Yet, you made the choice based off of what was important to other people, not yourself. And now you've got sizable student loan debt that makes you feel bad. But, do y'all see what I'm saying here? I hope I'm making sense. This is what I mean by aligning your choices with your values. Honestly, and maybe I've been hanging out with Ivana, my life coach friend, a little too much. But really, if you live a value-centered life and you let your values guide your choices, I think you will eliminate a whole lot of opportunity for regret. And while I'm thinking about it, y'all know we did a free workshop last year on aligning your goals, time, and money. I will put a link to that in the description of this video and in the show notes. So if this sounds like an area that you could use some work in, here's a resource for you. But I really do believe that if we were more in tune with what are our true core values, we would make better choices. And when I say the word better, I mean that in a way that choices that serve you better. Because that's really what's at the root of regret. You've made choices that don't serve you. So they weren't the best choices for you. Okay. So that's one way we can avoid living a life with regret. The other is, let's reframe how we think about regret and think about those particular incidences in our lives that we regret. I want us to reframe that. I want us to evaluate the decision based not on the outcome, because often that's what we feel regret about, is the outcome from the decision. So I want us to reframe and evaluate the decision we made, not based on the outcome, but based on the information we had at the time. I'll use an example from my own life that I know I have mentioned on YouTube. I may not have mentioned specifically on the podcast. It would be very easy for me to look back at the decision I made to trust the person I was married to, that I did not need to save my own money for retirement, that the money they were saving through their job would be for the both of us. I trusted that person, and even though I knew better, even though I did, I was like, I trust you, I am going to believe you. And I turned over, my financial future in retirement to this person, who then up in one day said, oh no, homie, that's my money. I don't know what you're talking about. Our money, that's my money. And I could look at that decision that I made to let their retirement money be for the two of us instead of doing something for myself. I could look back at that and beat myself up for it. Like, how much money? Now, y'all know who I am and what I do And I eventually ended up retiring early at 45. So I obviously bounced back from that and took my financial situation, the reins to that situation, into my own hands. But I could spend a lot of time beating myself up for making that choice, for believing that man. But given the circumstances at the time, given the information that I had, I don't know that that was the worst decision to make. It's sort of like Monday morning quarterback. Like some years later, and as I got to know him better, being married to him, I was like, oh yeah, girl, that was a mistake. I could get hung up on, wow, I could have been a millionaire by now had I not made this decision to trust this man and get caught up in his foolishness. You know what I'm saying? So I could get caught up in that. But instead, I just reframed the way I look at it. That was a very costly lesson, but it is a lesson that I learned, and moving forward in my life, I know better now and I take care of myself first. So instead of holding on to the disappointment and the sadness in making that choice, I've taken a new look at it. I've reframed it, and I'm like, basically I've let myself off the hook, because given the information I had at the time, that decision made sense. Now, Adalia of today, Adalia of 2023, would not make that same choice. Okay? So, not only is avoiding regret in our lives about making better choices, choices that are actually aligned with our values, it's also about not holding on to things and not beating ourselves up for things that, given the information we had at the time, that was the right I'm not going to say the right decision to make, but feasible, logical decision to make given the circumstances. We often feel regret for things that have happened to us in our life that were completely outside of our control. And we really have to let go of that. If you're like me, you probably got a truckload of childhood trauma that as an adult you are trying to make your way through. And there are, like I used to have a regret. I think we could use the word regret. I used to have a regret about not pursuing more academically. I used to have a regret about not pursuing more academically. I guess we could say I was in the top of my class. I was in the top 10%. It was a small class, but I was in the top 10%. I think I was number 4. I can't remember. And that right there, I don't know that there are any younger people who watch this podcast, but maybe you are the parent or the auntie of a younger person who is getting all bent out of shape about what their class rank is. And here I am at 48 and I can barely remember what it was. It just goes to show you, like, there are some things we think are so important in life, and eventually they just become inconsequential. But I used to have a regret about not doing more academically. Like, I did not choose to apply to schools that were highly competitive. If a college required you to write an essay, Adalia was not applying. And in retrospect, because again, that's where regret creeps in. Regret rarely happens in the moment. In retrospect, looking at my life, this is when I was still kind of trapped in the clutches of the whole Black excellence idea that I needed to, really, really push harder. I should have applied to more prestigious schools because I could have gotten in, but I didn't try. And so I used to beat myself up about that. But Was that something that was actually in my control? I was 17 years old. I was 18 years old with minimal adult supervision or support. Like, the fact that I even got out of high school, I should have been patting myself on the back for. The fact that I graduated as high up in my class as I did, I should have been patting myself on the back for. But instead, I was caught up in, you could have done more, you could have done better. But looking at it now, was that really in my control? I had no support, financial, mental, what have you. Like, I was out there doing it on my own. So I share this story just to remind us that we often beat ourselves up for things that have happened in our life. And when it comes down to it, it's not anything we had any real control over. Could I have said, you know what, I want to go to Princeton? I could have, but who was going to pay for the application fee? Who was going to help proofread my essays? And, there was nobody paying for like SAT prep, like all of the things that went into a college application process. I didn't have any of that. So why was I feeling guilty about this circumstance where I ended up going to school locally, that sort of thing. So all of that to say is, you should not feel regret about a circumstance in your life that you really and truly didn't have any control over. I tell people this all the time. Don't get bent out of shape. Don't spend an ounce of time worrying about things of which you have no control. Worry about the things that you can actually do something about, not the things that you can't. We talked about making better choices that are actually aligned with our values, rethinking how we've looked at past regrets and reframing the way we've looked at them. And avoiding regret is not just about, you made this choice and now you feel bad about that choice. It's not just about that, but it's also about how we react to it. And what I mean by that is, you've made the choice that your intuition was telling you not to, but you made that choice anyway for whatever reason. So regret is not just about feeling bad that you made that choice or disappointed that this thing happened to you. Oh my gosh, there was so much of my life that I felt bad. I felt bad about being poor. I felt bad about not choosing the right university. I felt bad about so many things. And these were not things that I could fix, that I could do anything about. But so there's that. But avoiding regret is also about how we react to those choices, or the realization of, I made this choice and it didn't serve me. The realization of, this thing happened in my life and I really wish it wouldn't have happened. It's about, how do we react to those things? How do we move forward once we've had the realization that, I wish this hadn't happened, I wish I hadn't have done this? Do we spend time wallowing in the disappointment and the sadness? Or do we acknowledge, hey, I feel this way, this sucks, and choose to move forward? So if you want to live a life where you don't have any regrets, you have to let go of the sadness and disappointment that you have about the things that have happened to you, about the choices that you have made. If you can't do that, you definitely can't move forward in your life and try and avoid regret. It's not going to work. I know there are a lot of folks on the internet with podcasts and YouTube channels that, be running off at the mouth and spouting their ideas. I'm one of them, but I really mean it when I say I want for you, just like I want it for myself, I want for you to be able to live your life in such a way that you regret absolutely nothing. I want that for you. But I gotta keep it real. That is not something that just happens. You have to be intentional about it. And so what I want you to do today, tomorrow, next week, is I want to challenge you. I want you to take some time and I want you to think about the choices you've made in life that you wish you hadn't, or the things that you've done that you would have done differently. If it helps, literally sit down with a pen and paper and write those things down. And they can be big things like, I should not have married that man, or I should not have married that man when I was 19. Or it could be something smaller, like, I wish I hadn't relaxed my hair. It doesn't matter, but go ahead and think about the choices you've made that you wish you hadn't, the things that you really wish you had done differently. And then I want you to ask yourself, do you regret those things? And when I say regret, remember what the definition of regret talks about is that you feel a sadness, repentance, you feel disappointment over those things. Is that how you feel about those choices? Or do you feel more of, that was a mistake, I learned from it, and I won't be doing that again? And then I want you, as you're looking at that list, I want you to think about, what are you doing to change that? If you regret this thing, like marrying that man when you were 19, what are you doing to change that? What are you doing to change how you feel about that choice? What are you doing to rectify that choice? Are you forgiving yourself? Are you reframing your thinking? What new choices are you making going forward? That's kind of your homework this week. As always, thank you so much for your continued support of me carving out this little space of the internet and sharing my thoughts and my life and my trials and my tribulations and my wins and all that good stuff. If you have not done so already, subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform for podcasts that you're listening to this on. Or if you are watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up. Another way that you can show support is to leave a review. I know on some of the podcatchers you have that ability. That would be great. If you think this episode or any of the other episodes I mentioned, and I will link to those as well, if you think any of those episodes would be good for other women in your life, please share those with them. And if you want to support the show financially, that is possible. In the description, there is a link to either become a patron specifically of the podcast, or you can go to Buy Me a Hot Chocolate, and there are a few different options available there. Thanks, guys. Until next time.